Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man. And you're listening to The Scoop on OurScoop.com. You already know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Scoop, OurScoop.com's podcast. We're on the second episode of our 10th season, Season 10, Episode 2. I'm John DeCarlo, joined by Declan Landis, Johnny Zwizlak, and Rymir Vaughn, who has a little bittersweet announcement for us in a little bit that we'll get to. I mean, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
We're gonna miss him, but I'm giving it away now.
Yeah, like, what are we doing here?
Spoiler alert. Good Lord.
We got a good show ahead for you guys. A lot of preseason camp football to talk about, some stuff to get into the mailbag as well. Some interesting stuff for the quarterback position. Again, as is always the case with preseason football. I think I said this last week and the week before. Not that you don't have some substantial stuff to talk about with spring ball, but preseason camp is where, the coaches start to get, I think, a little bit more honest about what they're seeing, largely in part because they are preparing a game plan. And Temple's less than a month away now from its season opener at Oklahoma, where they're obviously going to be heavy underdogs in that game. But Stan Drayton said some interesting stuff about the quarterback position that we'll get to. We have got some audio for you as well, just from a lot of media availability to talk about. We're going to play my portion of my interview with Andrew McIlquham, the team's long snapper, a guy that gets his job done, has gotten his job done over the past couple of years. You wouldn't really know because he just basically snaps the ball and does what he's supposed to do. But he's on the Wuerffel Trophy and the AFCA Good Works team watch list. We've had the chance since we last recorded to talk to Dante Wright, Demerick Morris, defensive tackles coach Kevon Beckwith, defensive line coach Larry Knight, and offensive line coach Chris Wiesahan. The quarterbacks are going to be talking tomorrow. So that means Evan Simon, Forrest Brock, and Tyler Douglas are going to be available tomorrow. So obviously we won't have audio of them on this episode, but we'll have some for you for next week. So a lot of good football to talk about ahead. The Scoop, as always, is brought to you by Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. If you've been injured while on the road or the highway and the crash was someone else's fault, the insurance company is not going to be on your side. You need us, Temple Law grads, who will fight hard to get the compensation that you deserve. We only get paid if we win. So in Pennsylvania or New York, call us today at 215-261-7359. That's 215-261-7359. And you can find them on the web at greenspans-law.com. That's greenspans-law.com. Rymir Vaughn has got some good news for us.
Yes.
What would you like to pass along to our loyal OurScoop listeners here?
So my time at OurScoop will be coming to an end because I am moving on to Penn Live as a high school sports reporter.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I will be covering the Mid-Penn Conference, and look out for bylines coming soon. Probably as soon as the 23rd. My first day is the 19th. I don't know if they're going to have me do anything.
Second largest readership of any media outlet in the state behind the Inquirer. So that's larger than the Post-Gazette. So this is a great, great first job for you. We knew you were bound for big things. Been doing stuff for the Inquirer, been doing stuff for us. We love you. We're happy for you. Where can people follow you? I mean, I know a lot of our people who listen to Scoop probably follow you on Twitter, but just in case they don't, where can they follow your work?
To be honest, I don't even know my Twitter handle.
I do not know what your Twitter handle is.
I think it's 1500_Mir or something like that. Or like,
you might have to change it now to something that's a little bit more memorable.
Yeah, I can never remember what it is.
It is _Mir 1500.
I was close.
There we go.
I was close. You can follow me on Instagram too, because I'll be posting on that.
He's just that humble, ladies and gentlemen, where he doesn't even really remember his own Twitter handle.
Make sure you turn post notifications on for him too.
Yes.
Yes.
Follow me on Instagram too. 15_Basil. BASIL is Basil, not Basil.
Not basil, contrary to popular opinion. Hey, Mir, do you like cooking? Do you like cooking, Mir?
I love cooking. I love cooking. It's very ironic.
Is that last year or a couple years ago that I asked you about?
It might have been last year.
It was last year. Don't try to brush it off. It was last
I'm not
year.
trying to brush it off. I'm owning up
It was
to it. I
less
asked
than
you. I
less
was
than
like,
a
"Do you
year
like
ago,
cooking
I'd
with
say.
basil?" You're like, "No, it's not what that."
I think
is."
it was like October. Not even a year.
It
you know?
definitely was not too long ago, like not very long ago.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
You don't learn unless you ask.
That's true.
How was I supposed to know? Declan's into Zoom emojis right now. He sent you little rocket ship emojis when you announced your job news. Now he just hit the little laughing emoji things.
Yeah, I didn't know this was a feature. I don't know why Kyle doesn't do this all the time. This is
How are you
great.
able to get him? How are you able to get him to fly across the screen? I can just get the one to go up in the top left corner. I can't do the.
Are you on your phone, Declan?
Magician never reveals his secrets.
That's a yes.
You got a full screen it, and then
But this is great because you're going to be covering a lot of, well, you'll be covering a lot of good high school football out there too. So,
Yes, I can't wait.
yeah, we might be, if Temple's recruiting Central PA, we might need to lean on you and have you back on the show and say, Johnny just raised his hand. This is like amateur hour here. We're trying to record a serious podcast, guys. We're trying to
Just
record
an
a
hour late.
serious podcast.
his
these
podcast.
And these two goofballs over here in the daycare are like, let's see if John notices these emojis. You guys are like, you know what the sleepy haws are? Did you ever, like, as a kid, go to like a sleepover and you can't fall asleep and like,
I didn't have a sleepover until high school.
why am I not surprised?
Oh no,
You got
You're still not allowed to curse.
it's true.
Has Mama Landis had any recent feedback about the scoop?
We haven't taken any road trips, so to my knowledge, she hasn't listened in a little bit.
Is that when they have secret or not secret, serious conversations with you and say, Declan, now that we have you alone here in the car, to address your behavior on the podcast?
It is a good vehicle for that time.
Yeah.
It's a logical step.
All right, so now you guys know where you can continue to follow Rymir's work, and then hopefully we can bring him on here and there on the scoop because, like I said, Temple could be recruiting players from that area. But for at least another episode here, you're going to get his college football expertise. We've got a lot of college football to talk about, as I said. Temple's inching closer and closer. Recording this on Thursday, August 8th, so that season opener, like I said, is less than a month away, and they're going to start paring things down with each of these position battles. So we've got really a lot of stuff to talk about on the roster. But before we do, we'll turn things over to Declan for on around this date. Declan, do you have a better performance tuned up here than last week? You were fine last week. I'm just teasing you.
Thanks so much. That was really nice of you to say. I don't know. I guess there's only one way to find out, and that's by taking a look at what happened on this day in August 9th, as that's the, I assume, the day we're going to be releasing this episode.
Or maybe we'll release
Nobody
this in a
tells
few
me
weeks.
anything. There you go. Nobody tells me anything. We'll start with the birthdays, as we always do. On this day in 1963, this American singer and actress was born. Just probably top 5 voices of all time.
1963?
Correct, yes.
American
Her biggest
singer,
What?
American singer and actress, 1963, top 5 voices of all time. What clue were you about to give us?
I mean, her biggest, I guess when she was most popular is probably 80s, 90s,
Madonna.
No.
Whitney Houston.
Whitney
Oh,
Houston.
good job, Johnny. Good job.
Good
That's
pull,
nice.
Johnny. On this day in 1967, this multi-sport athlete was born. Very famous. Probably, I'd say equally as famous for his coaching.
Deion Sanders.
Prime time, Deion Sanders. We will move on. On this day in 1173, a little bit of a throwback for you.
Johnny always gets so upset. He throws his head back when you come up with like later or earlier dates. Like, how am I supposed to
1173, John. What are we doing here?
pick up a book, Johnny? You can read every once in a while.
My bad.
Educate yourself.
I'll read up on 1173. My bad.
Well, you're about to, because on this day in 1173, construction on this infamous European building began. It's a bell tower.
Tower of London?
It's, I would say, it's probably its most distinguishing feature is that
Big Ben?
it's definitely built differently than any other building.
Leaning Tower of Pisa?
The Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Forget that I said Big Ben. the Tower of London.
I was just gonna go over it, but we circled back, and I mean, what were you thinking there? On this day in 1854, excuse me, this very popular author released Walden, which was about, I believe, trees and whatnot.
Henry David Thoreau.
Henry David Thoreau. On this day,
anytime you guys want to, like participate and catch up, so I don't have to provide all the answers here, just let me know.
Hey,
Johnny got Whitney.
I got one on the board. I got
I'm
one.
cooked.
Yeah.
I'm cooked.
Johnny got Whitney Houston, which is right up your alley. So it is 2-1 right now. On this day in 1945, the second atomic bomb dropped on Japan by the United States in World War II struck this city.
Hiroshima.
Hiroshima?
No.
Oh, Nagasaki.
Nagasaki. Yeah.
Attaboy, Johnny. Tied up. On this day in 1988, the most infamous trade in hockey history took place, sending this player from what team to what team? You should know this.
Gretzky from the Oilers to the LA Kings?
It was Gretzky from the Oilers to the LA Kings on this day in 1995. And this is Bertonica speaking, not me. So if you disagree, let me know. This American musician who personified the hippie counterculture for 3 decades died of a heart attack at the age of 53.
Jerry Garcia.
Jerry Garcia. And that was on this day.
Hmm. Could you put anything in Rymir's wheelhouse? Like, just asked him about, like,
He did. Yo, beat me to it.
You know, why don't you go make some history on today or tomorrow, today as you're listening to this, and then we can talk about that next year. You know what I'm saying?
Declan's upset with me. He's really upset with me. He's getting shippy.
I'm just saying, throwing that out there.
Maybe I should.
What do you mean by that, Johnny?
I didn't have any meaning behind
Somebody
it.
check this guy's notebook.
Jesus.
I didn't say it was going to be bad history. Not all history is bad. What are we doing here? Why are we just assuming it's bad?
Spent too much time with Sam Cohn this weekend.
Because you've got a dark side that nobody knows about, Johnny Swislak.
Oh,
I don't think that's true, but you guys can believe whatever you want.
People remember the bad stuff you do, Johnny. No one remembers the good stuff.
That's a good point.
is that in general or specifically a Johnny?
In general.
I don't think that's
like,
entirely true. I think there are people who remember for good things, but
Right.
what does my opinion matter? We're just gonna move on here in a second anyway.
Johnny, your opinion matters about this Temple
Mom,
football
Johnny's
team.
being silenced on the podcast again.
Johnny, you'll always have an advocate in Mrs. Landis.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But that was,
Well,
that
don't
was a
thank
good
me.
segue.
Thank Declan's mom.
That was a good segue that you had there.
It was. Thank you. At least somebody acknowledged it. Johnny, again, as I was saying, we want your opinion on this Temple football team. So I'm not trying to overplay this or underplay this. One of the interesting pieces of conversation that came up this week on Monday's media availability. I asked Stan Drayton just a basic question about the quarterbacks. How are things coming along? And I kind of more or less said, is it still an open competition? I said to Stan, are you basically kind of zeroing in on Forrest Brock or Evan Simon? And the first person he brought up was Tyler Douglas. And we can play that clip for you here in a second. We've talked about the fact that in the spring, and you guys saw this in even more detail than I did, Tyler Douglas, of the quarterbacks in the room right now in the spring, looked like he belonged from a high major. He looked like a high major athlete in terms of his mobility, in terms of like you'd look out there and say, that guy looks like a D1 quarterback, but he did not. He was inconsistent at best throwing the ball, right?
Yeah.
So he's the first guy that Stan Drayton brought up. And again, it's August 8th. And so when we were having this conversation, it was Monday of this week. So a lot of football left to be played. By no means did Stan say that it's Tyler Douglas's job to lose. But again, that was the first name that came up. And he said it's a three-man race right now between Tyler Douglas, the redshirt freshman from Ocean Township High School, Forrest Brock, the JUCO transfer who saw a little bit of time last year. Again, he played the second half of the SMU game where they had no shot at coming back in the second half and winning that game. And then Evan Simon, the Rutgers transfer who had lost his job up there to Gavin Wimsatt. So, but interesting that he brought up Tyler's name. I'm going to play this clip here. This is me asking Stan the question, then following up and asking him if he feels that Tyler has progressed as a thrower, and then we'll react to this. How have things looked at quarterback? Is anybody starting to kind of slowly emerge there as you get closer to the opener, or is it still kind of a little wide open, or at least between maybe Forrest and Evan?
Well, Tyler brings something different to the table too. Tyler Douglas is really having a really good fall camp thus far. We're right at the over the halfway point of our install, right? So there's still some things that are going to go in that will affect the quarterback position, and it's going to be real critical for us to find out, the productivity that these guys are going to bring within our situations and things of that sort. So it is still an open competition, to answer your question, but at the same time, 3 guys have emerged, and they're really getting after it, which is fun to watch.
I would think he's the most mobile of the guys that you have, but has he progressed more as a thrower from the spring to the point where he's really kind of entered the conversation?
Yeah, he's getting better as a passer. He absolutely has the ability to extend the play with his feet. There's no question that is a strength of his. We'll use that if he's the guy, but I think he's getting better in the throw game. He's making, fast decisions, getting the ball out of his hands. There's a couple of really good balls. He threw a couple of shots today for some explosive plays. So he's making it interesting for sure.
All right. So just to remind our listeners, practices are not open in preseason camp. We get basically, you can show up if you want to for 15 minutes to get B-roll, but you're not going to see anything during that time. Do you guys find it interesting? Like, again, when I followed up with Stan, I said, do you feel like he's improved as a passer? And he said, yes. So I don't really necessarily think this is coach speak. I don't think that Stan's a big BS guy in terms of like posturing. And, I know coaches always look for an advantage. And I'm not saying that like if Stan is somehow able to throw Oklahoma off in terms of who they start, that Temple's going to go down there and win. Again, they're heavy underdogs for a reason. But did you guys find this interesting that now, Tyler Douglas's name is starting to come up a little bit more? Or do you kind of take this as like, okay, this is just a redshirt freshman progressing a little bit? Did you guys find this interesting at all that he's now bringing up Tyler's name?
I think it's interesting for the fact that this wasn't necessarily a question in the spring, but now it is. I think that says a lot about Forrest Brock. It says a lot about Evan Simon and where those two are. Mm-hmm. And not to say that they're disappointed, but those two were the guys that, we specifically, we as in the media were looking at, okay, these are the 2 guys that are going to come in and compete because, Tyler Douglas is a redshirt freshman. There's no way he's going to be able to compete with those guys. And I think it says a lot about those 2 and where they are. And who knows, like Tyler Douglas could have, the practices that we didn't see, he could have went crazy and earned that. I'm not saying that he didn't. I'm not going to sit there and say that. But I think it says more about those 2 than it does about him.
Declan, Johnny, any thoughts on this?
It definitely is interesting. And I mean, after we saw kind of with what happened with EJ, how the staff wasn't afraid to kind of put him in that role when they felt like he was talented enough and was playing well enough to go in and move into the starting role. I mean, maybe something like that could happen with Tyler Douglas if he's practicing well and showing good things. Like you mentioned, he has the athletic ability, he has the mobility. It's just if he can be consistent with his passing. And I mean, I still think Forrest Brock or Evan Simon are probably going to be the guys at least to start week 1. But who knows? Maybe if things don't start off the right way those first 2 weeks, maybe we could see the same situation where EJ stepped in, and maybe Tyler Douglas could do the same in a couple weeks into the season.
I think it's definitely an interesting conversation because on one hand, like you guys said, it shows that they are more confident in what Tyler Douglas is saying, but you guys kind of alluded to it. What's their confidence level in Evan Simon and Forrest Brock now? Like we heard last week, 2 weeks ago, where they said, Forrest Brock has the plays down. He looks a little better, but Evan Simon is a leader where Forrest Brock maybe isn't that. And now all of a sudden Tyler Douglas is his name's coming up in this conversation. It doesn't inspire confidence, that they feel confident in who's going to be the person going forward. And I think that's something to worry about because we talked about it a little bit last week where they just need somebody to get the ball to the playmakers. And if that's kind of the bar, where are these guys at now? So I guess from, obviously from a very outside perspective, like I haven't been able to go to media stuff. I've been watching clips. I've been, listening. It's hard at the hardware store. What am I going to say? But I think like it doesn't exactly inspire confidence, especially with week one. Not necessarily around the corner, but you're staring down the face of the season where we've already mentioned the stakes. So,
well, I look at it this way: we know for a fact, and too many sources have told us that they, well, even Stan said like back in the spring, he's like, yeah, we will look in the portal for more depth at the quarterback position. But I know for a fact that they were exploring the transfer portal for a quarterback. I think it's fair to say that, especially after the spring, they did not look around. Stan and Danny Langsdorff were not saying that Forrest Brock is the guy or Evan Simon is the guy. He just needed a shot after losing out to Gavin Wimsatt at Rutgers. They absolutely pursued help in the portal, couldn't find anything to their liking. So yeah, on one hand, like Declan is saying, you could look at it and say, maybe this is a bad sign because they're not seeing enough of Evan Simon or Forrest Brock, where one of those two guys is taking control of the job. And so they're saying, okay, Tyler Douglas is the guy. I think realistically, and I think we've talked about this too, I think you're gonna see all three guys play in the opener. And like Kyle said last week, I think yes, the Oklahoma game matters. It would certainly matter if they pull off this major upset, but you got to really kind of get things together in weeks 2, 3, and 4 after that. And I think we're going to know more about who the real starter is going to be at quarterback in the following weeks. I think that they're probably going to play all three guys in that game, see how they respond to adversity. I think Stan is authentic if I ask about the quarterback position. Again, there have been some coaches here in the past who will kind of, BS you a little bit more. We've talked about, and again, I like the guy. He did a good job when he was here, but the whole, we're going to play three guys against Notre Dame that Jeff Collins did was just ended up kind of backfiring on him. I don't think Stan is the type to BS. I think they probably are legitimately intrigued by what they've seen recently from Tyler. But Declan, to your point, if they were seeing what they absolutely needed to see out of Evan Simon or Forrest Brock at this point, they'd be saying, they weren't afraid to say, I know it's a different position. Hey, Grayson Maines, it's his job to lose at center. Just like in the past, it's EJ's job to lose at this point. So you're right. It's not a good sign at this point that neither Evan Simon or Forrest Brock is taking control of the job. And even if Tyler Douglas has progressed as a passer, we'd be hard pressed to say that he has gotten so much better as a thrower that you're going to see him go out and throw for 2,800 yards and complete 65% of his passes. I don't know if he's that good yet, but guys are allowed to get better. So we'll see. I don't know that we've mentioned maybe what does Chris Dietrich bring to the table. It's early, but Stan, as of earlier this week, said it's a competition between three guys, and those guys are Evan Simon, Forrest Brock, and Tyler Douglas. Again, they are going to talk tomorrow. We're recording this on Thursday, August 8th. So they're going to be talking to reporters tomorrow. So yeah, as of now, for whatever it's worth, Tyler Douglas's name has come up more often than we might have initially thought. So that piece of it, I think, is intriguing. And if he can get better, maybe it might end up being a positive. So obviously the quarterback position was going to be the one that everybody was going to be focused in on, but something to keep track of there. We'll have more conversation, obviously, next week about the quarterbacks, as we will until they name a starter. We want to play this audio here too. A guy that really doesn't get a lot of attention because you don't really want him getting a lot of attention if he's doing his job the right way. And that's the team's long snapper, Andrew McIlquham. Again, I mentioned at the outset of the show that he is on the Wuerffel Trophy and the AFCA Good Works team watch list for the good work that he is doing, the good community service work that he's doing. So I had a chance to talk to him this week for media availability, and they made him available to reporters because he's on those watch lists. So I just think Andrew's a cool story. He walked on at TCU, went to high school in Connecticut, walked on at TCU, didn't think he was going to have the opportunity to really just get a chance to play there. And he came to Temple and has really just quietly been the team's long snapper. And they really haven't had, they've had a lot of other issues. They had issues in the secondary, losing EJ Warner is going to be an issue. They were, not good on either side of the line of scrimmage, but long snapping has not been a problem And again, I know that long snapping's not going to win you a conference championship, but Andrew McIlquham has quietly just been doing his job. So he was made available to reporters this week. Here's a guy that, again, really just doesn't get the opportunity to talk much. So thought we'd give him a little attention here. And I'm going to play my conversation with him from this week's media availability. Just gives you some insight into a guy who was really an important cog on the team, and cool to see him under consideration for 2 national awards that are service related. So we'll play this for you here, and then we'll have more on the other side version what you can expect in the coming days with our coverage. You're on the watch list for a pretty cool national award. Where does your dedication to service and just doing what you do, like where does that come from? Because a lot of guys say they want to do it and don't do it, but you've just really immersed yourself in it and done some really cool things. Where does that come from?
It's just always been a passion of mine. I grew up around kids my whole life, and even my girlfriend, like, she's a second grade teacher. So seeing her and seeing her impact with the kids, it's always just made me want to have a strong impact as well.
When you're focusing on maintaining a good GPA, playing football, you have an important position where, if you do it right, no one's noticing, but if you don't do it right, it can affect the game. So you have a lot on your plate. Like, how do you make the time for it and balance it out?
You always have time. I feel like I just always find a way to make time. And like, even I did a lot of work during the spring when we have a lot more free time. So as of right now, I just kind of been trying to do a little bit here and there, but once the season ends, you have a lot more free time, and then you just kind of work around classes and everything.
Can you just kind of take us through your football journey about how you walked on at TCU and then how you ended up at Temple?
Yeah, so I started at IMG Academy, which was an amazing experience. Did the whole thing during COVID recruiting, and I decided to walk on to TCU. Didn't feel like I had the best opportunity there, so I decided into the portal. And, Temple was one of the main schools calling me up, and, I ran with it, and I played the past 2 years and excited about these next 2.
I mean, how long has it been since you've been a long snapper? Like, some guys want that responsibility, some don't. Did you do it going back to high school, or did you kind of see it as like a ticket to getting on a D1 roster?
Yeah, so I started my junior high school. We had a kicker at my first high school, and he, was going to all these different camps and all that. And I was just like, dang, I want to do that too. So I started YouTubing stuff, and I found long snapping. So I learned how to long snap over YouTube. And then ever since then, my junior year, I played at my local high school, and I got recruited by IMG, and then so on and so forth.
What goes into it beyond just like the basics of the position? Because like I said, it's like, if you're doing it well, you have it down to a science, nobody really notices you. But if you don't, there's a lot, you could affect the game in a bad way. What goes into it in terms of technique and focus and all that stuff, if you had to explain it to somebody who didn't get the process?
Just having a process. Every single time I take the field, I always just focus on just the little things, and then it's all just muscle memory once you get to like a certain point. But yeah, just really just going through my steps and going through my process, and that's all it is.
Do you have guys in the NFL that you have followed, like long snappers that you've tried to emulate, or guys that you look up to and follow?
Yeah, definitely. One of them is Rick Lovato, the guy for the Eagles. They come out here every once in a while and get working. So I always try to get some work in with him when they're done training. So yeah, there's definitely some guys that I look up to and obviously want to simulate. Once
you've snapped the ball and then you're getting downfield as a blocker, or just moving on to your responsibilities as a blocker, what does that part of the game look like for you?
Well, the first thing first, snap the ball. That's the most important job, as my coach always says. And then pick your head up and just trying to run down the field and just follow my rules, get to the return as fast as I can, and try to force a fair catch.
I wanted to ask you about Maddox. I think Stan had said like he's got like a bit of an edge to him. He's kicked in some big stadiums, and they really seem to like what he's been doing so far. What's your impression of him since he's gotten to camp and just snapping the ball?
I love Matt, my roommate. So we've got a great bond together, and I'm excited about this year, and I'm excited to make some big kicks.
What is the communication like with a kicker in terms of, obviously there's the simplicity of snapping the ball, but what goes into that in terms of like what he likes, what he prefers, and the communication and all that stuff?
It's just, like I said, always having an X-play mindset, and he likes just always having the laces out, which I try to perfect all the time. And yeah, we have a great relationship so far, and like I said, I'm really excited for the season.
All right, so some good stuff there from Temple's long snapper, Andrew McIlquham. A lot of stuff. If you're following our coverage throughout the week, you can listen to this week's interviews with Dante Wright and Demerick Morris. Of course, Dante Wright becomes the veteran in that receiver room. Demerick Morris, who missed most of last season with what was initially feared to be a season-ending injury, but he played in the last 2 games. He's fully healthy now. I think we could all say, right, we'll be like kind of mildly surprised if guys like Dante Wright and Demerick Morris don't end up as single-digit guys this season. You can listen to interviews with Temple's defensive tackles coach Kevon Beckwith, the defensive line coach Larry Knight, and Chris Wiesenham. We were able to ask Chris, hey, tell us more about Grayson Maines. He's the guy that your head coach had said it's his job to lose at center at this point. So Chris always gives you a good breakdown of what's going on his offensive line. Again, so you can go back, and those interviews are up on the site now. You can find them at owlscoop.com. Johnny's got a story coming up. Declan has a story coming up. So every day you're going to see stories up on the site now about this Temple football team as we get closer and closer and closer to that season opener. And again, stay tuned for tomorrow. I mean, you're going to be listening to this on Friday morning. In addition to the scoop, you'll be able to listen to the interviews with Evan Simon, Forrest Brock, and Tyler Douglas. So you'll hear directly from those guys who are battling for that starting quarterback position. Later mailbag this week, we do have our weekly tip from Mike Greenspan of Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. If you're new to this now, again, Mike has now at this point been a sponsor of the Scoop and advertised on the Scoop for more than a year. We talk about Mike's industry and being an injury lawyer. And one of the things that he does, despite being an injury lawyer and helping people when they do have a mishap on the road, he wants to help keep you safe on the road. So he's going to be providing weekly tips here about being safe on the road. So you'll hear from Mike here, and then we will get to the mailbag after that.
Have you ever been in a Zoom meeting and you notice that somebody who's participating is actually driving at the same time? Is that safe? In a word, no. Think about it. If you're driving, your job is to do what? Keep your eyes out on the road and make sure that the road is safe for you and everybody else on it. You can't do that if you're in a Zoom meeting. So if you're on a city street, a residential neighborhood, and you're looking down at a phone to participate in a Zoom meeting, you're not going to see a kid or a pedestrian darting out in front of you or simply walking because you weren't looking. Stay safe, keep our eyes on the road, and if you have a Zoom meeting, take it from somewhere else, anywhere but the driver's seat. Go Owls.
Right. Thank you again to Mike Greenspan of Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. You'll be hearing from him every week, hoping to get him on the pod soon because, again, he's a Temple Law School grad, longtime Temple fan. I think it's always cool to, just to highlight fan stories and let listeners know why Mike, likes his podcast, follows our site, follows our work, and chose to advertise with us. And he's a good guy. And again, if anything does happen to you along those lines where you do happen to get into an accident, you need a good injury lawyer, Mike is definitely the guy to call. Going into the mailbag here, the one question we have is from one of our subscribers, DBlaze75. Good question here. He's asking us, and in his question from the football message board, this is the time of the year where I become unrealistic and start convincing myself things will be better for Temple football this season. I see a defensive line with DeJuan Black, who may reach 10 sacks if healthy, Trey Thomas, who may have 5 sacks and a bunch of TFLs, tons of depth, yet unproven amongst the defensive tackles, an offensive line that has some experienced youth, and finally depth, yet unproven in many ways. The running backs can't get any worse, and there seems to be some talent there. I looked at the schedule and thought they can win 5 games if healthy. How unrealistic am I? I'll start here real quick because I like this question because it just tips off a lot of other things to talk about, and we can play some audio here. My initial thought, and I obviously want to throw this out to you guys, I don't think DBlaze75 that you're being unrealistic. I think everything that you're saying is kind of fair. We'll play a clip here in a couple seconds because I asked about, last week, Everett Withers was asked about the pass rush. And I think he basically said, well, it's a privilege to be able to rush the passer. Before we even get concerned about, rushing the passer, we got to stop the run. We got to be better up front. And he's absolutely right about that. I asked Larry Knight about DeJuan Black and about Trey Thomas. And I said, are those your two proven guys, and he more or less said yes, but a lot of times like they're both great athletes, and sometimes guys can get away with athleticism but they lose sight of some of their technique, which is a good point to consider. So I just want to play that real quick so you guys can hear what I'm talking about there. And it's not Larry Knight saying like, no, that they're not capable pass rushers, but these guys are. Again, like Trey Thomas is a JUCO player. DeJuan Black started off at Florida. So if you're, I don't care whether you succeed there or you don't succeed there. If you're recruited into the SEC, you got to be doing something right at the high school level. And DeJuan Black was an SEC level recruit. So you're going to hear Larry Knight, Temple's defensive line coach, who was, of course, here with Jeff Collins and followed him to Georgia Tech, now back at Temple. Here's Larry talking about those guys and talking about, yes, they have the athletic ability, but need to get better in terms of technique in their hands and stuff like that. How have Trey and DeJuan Black progressed? Just, I mean, again, on the surface, they look like maybe the guys with the potential to be maybe your top two difference makers as pass rushers. They flashed that, but what have you seen from them so far, just in these first few practices?
Improving technique. These are two guys that are really good athletes. But there have been some refining that's been needed to be done when it comes to their technique, hand usage, eyes, feet, hips, those different types of things. So that's been really cool to see, especially with DeJuan, because you know how it can be when a guy is a really, really good athlete, they can get away with some bad habits. And he's been working to fix some of those things that are gonna just make him even better, along with him being a great athlete. Trey is that way as well. He's been that way since day one. So that's been awesome to be a part of watching those guys develop those traits.
All right. So I think that you guys tend to be a little bit more skeptical, but I think T-Blaze 75 is looking at this in an optimistic way, but I don't think he's being blindly optimistic. I don't know that DeJuan Black and Trey Thomas are double-digit sack guys. I think even Stan Drayton might have said that. Yes, depth on the line, but unproven. An O-line that has some experience, youth, and finally depth, yet unproven in many ways. I would agree with that. The running backs can't get any worse, and there seems to be some talent there. A guy like Terez Worthy is in camp now. Maybe they can win 5 games if healthy. How unrealistic am I? Do you guys think that Temple is capable of winning 5 games? Do you guys think that D-Blaze 75 is being unrealistic here? You think he's too optimistic, or do you think he's right in line with where his thinking should be?
I wouldn't say it's unrealistic. I would say it's unlikely. I think it's kind of the route that I would
Good
go.
way of putting it, Johnny.
That's a great word.
Like, sure, like last year on the line of scrimmage, like I don't think you can get any worse, like health wise.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was pretty brutal on both the offensive line and the defensive line. And if you're able to stay healthy there and you can start up front, and maybe you can get some, maybe you can stop the run, because that was they were one of the worst rushing defenses in the American. If they can find a way to stop that, maybe the defense can figure it out from there. But I think to look at the schedule, and I mean, there are games that they can win on there and add to that 5-game threshold that D-Blaze was talking about. But I think 5 wins is very unlikely, and I would kind of set them in that based on how last season went, with how the roster looks now and what we've heard. I'd set it at maybe 3 or 4 would be more likely. I think 5 is where you start to get to that unlikely, and then past that's unrealistic range.
Look, shout out D-Blaze. Thank you. Because when you read this question, it should be a no-brainer, right? Like 5 wins should be a possibility. With all due respect, it's 2024. You're not going to win games with a quarterback you don't believe in, And if they don't have somebody that, like we've talked about, can distribute the ball to your playmakers, they're not going to be able to run an offense, because you need somebody that can competently distribute the ball. We saw that with EJ Warner last year. Like the games that they won because he had good days under center and he was able to get the ball out. And, the defense made like 1 or 2 stops, which they did in a lot of games last year, but they just struggled after that.
Before you go any further, let me throw a counter question out to you. The last 2 seasons you did have, now granted 2 seasons ago, they didn't know at this juncture of the year that EJ Warner was going to pass for 3,000 plus yards and go on to set a few program passing records. But heading into last season, at this point, they had a quarterback they could believe in. Yes, he got hurt. He had the concussion, but they still only won 3 games because they were not good in other areas of the field. So even with EJ Warner, that got him, even as a known commodity heading into last year, they were a 3-win team. Who's to
Which
say
was my
that?
point with the question, though, because he's saying everywhere that they were struggling with last year, they got a little better and they have
Right.
more depth and more talent. But now it becomes the focal point of the team last year that you've completely lost that, that star power. So my point being, yes, it's great that they got better, but now you're still at square one, because it's like, well, you can't put it all together now, right? Like now it's yeah, it's great that you got this depth, you've got this talent, you have a potentially capable O line that's not going to get hurt or has the pieces to replace if they do get hurt. You have running backs with a little protection up front. You have the D line that can possibly stop the run now. But now you've got that guy that was your go-to person is gone, and you don't have a replacement for him. That's just a whole host of issues that are going to prevent them from taking that same next step, is what I'm trying to say.
Rymir, let me ask you this, and again, these are all good points here. Every year, we're not getting it this week, but someone will say, look at the schedule, give me the wins and losses, give me the prediction. Again, barring a minor miracle, they're going to lose at Oklahoma on Friday, August 30th. I think a big indication of how this season is going to go, not the ultimate be all end all, is how they respond the following week at Navy, a triple option team. I think if they go down to Navy and they get their clocks cleaned and they don't respond well, then you might say, oh, okay, this could be a really long season. After Oklahoma, they're at Navy. They come home to host Coastal Carolina on Saturday, September 14th. Then they host Utah State on Saturday, September 21st. 5 days later, they're hosting, obviously, a much better Army team at Lincoln Financial Field on a Thursday night game on national TV on ESPN. So, and then you got UConn the following week on October 5th. Those are their best chances to really line up some wins. And you could, again, you're going to be 0-1 after Oklahoma. I think the Navy, Coastal, Utah State, even the Army game and UConn, those are winnable games. I'm not saying they're going to win all of them, but if you're looking at some absolutes here, Oklahoma's not winnable. If they beat them, we've got a greater story to tell. It's not out of the realm of possibility that you could win your next 5. That's where you have to make some hay if you have any shot of improving on last year's win total. Rymir, I'm going to advance this and move this forward a little bit and ask it this way. So we know there are doubts at the quarterback position. There's no known commodity there, even if they're slightly more encouraged by Tyler Douglas. I'll ask it to you this way. Could they get to 5 wins if you've taken a step back at quarterback, and these are conditional? Your offensive line is better than it was last year. If your offensive line is better and more capable than it was last year, your D line was better, and that defense shifting to a 4-3, upgrading, getting immediate better JUCO help at all 3 levels of the defense, and you got a better place kicker, and let's say a Landon Morris is a difference maker. Can you get to 5 wins with an average quarterback who can just facilitate and do what they're supposed to do? You don't need them to do what E.J. Warner did in shattering program passing records and stuff. Could they be a 5-win team this year because everything else around the quarterback could be better?
Yes. And I think for that to happen, at least offensively, I need to see the Danny Langsdorf that called that game against UTSA. He was on one that day. I don't know what side of the bed he woke up on. I don't know what breakfast he had that morning, but he was on one that day.
Yeah.
If we get that Danny Langsdorf, I see no problem them getting to.
Wouldn't you also? And now, granted, they lost. Sorry to cut you off. They lost that game, and that was ultimately the game where EJ came out of there and he was dinged up with the concussion. And he put up some great numbers that day. They did lose, and we're not sitting here breaking down film of it. And we're not saying that the line protection was perfect that day, but it was a little bit better, and guys are playing better around him. So you can see what happens when things do look a little bit better around him. I think they clearly upgraded. Obviously, Jordan McGee's a huge loss. Vandy Rigby's a big loss. The secondary, and I think we'll look on to see that Jalen McMurray could be better with better talent around him. But I think they've upgraded the linebackers and the D line and the corners and the safeties and even the O line. Rich Rodriguez, again, my hats off to him for trying to play every week. He was always banged up, but I think they are going to be better at those positions. How much better, I don't know. I think it'll just be really interesting to see even if they take a step back at quarterback, I think there is a chance there. But would you guys agree that a season's a living, breathing thing? We'll start to get the identity of some of these teams like a Tulsa and ECU. Tulane should be good again. The conference schedule is going to be tougher, but I think they have to really kind of, really land their body blows there against the Coastals. Again, Utah State, I don't know how they're going to respond to having to fire their coach after spring ball, like right before preseason camp starts. Army should be good. I think it's possible. What do you think? And just to kind of tie a bow on this, and we'll make this Rymir heavy at the end, since we're going to miss him again.
Okay.
They're still going to be in our lives, but where do you think they upgraded if they are going to be a 5-win team? And let's say D-Blaze 75 gets his wish, or let's say they may even get to 6 wins and they somehow sneak into a bowl game, but they get average to decent quarterback play, whether it is either a Tyler Douglas or Chris Dietrich, somebody who is decent enough, but we know they're not as good as EJ Warner. Where do you think they have improved the most to get them, or where could they improve the most? If you're talking to your gut and saying, okay, there's another area of the field that's going to allow them to be more sound and stable to push them to a middle of the pack conference team.
The trenches I think that is the answer. I forgot who said it. I don't remember if it was Johnny or I think it was Johnny. They can't get any more hurt than they were last year. Mm-hmm. It was bad last year in terms of injuries, and that you've seen it on the field. Like, it's guys who weren't ready to play were out there playing, and quite frankly, they were getting their behinds kicked. Yeah. And if they can hold up in protection, hold up in run blocking, disrupt, passing plays on the other side of the ball, disrupt run plays on the other side of the ball, then it allows them to, one, do more offensively, because if you can hold up, you can now start to take those shots down the field that they missed last year. Like, the short stuff is easier to run. The intermediate stuff is easier to run. Play action, you can start doing more things offensively when your offensive line is, giving you a few seconds to throw the ball. Yeah. And defensive linemen aren't living in the backfield. On the other side of the ball, if you can't stop the run, you can't stop anything. So if they can, like Wither said, if they can stop the run and they can, hold up in the run game defensively, it allows them, again, to do so much more defensively. And when it comes to getting those stops, that if they would have held up against the run, maybe they beat Rutgers last year. If they hold up against the run.
Yeah, because that's where the levee broke against them in the second half. They just got beat into oblivion in the second half. I mean, they just got crushed, because early on that was a winnable game, and then it was over. Yeah, think of any cliche you can think of. I mean, they just ran over them.
Yeah, and maybe you get a stop or two against UTSA and you win that game, and we're having a totally different conversation now.
Yeah,
but the trenches are where they need. If they are going to win 5-6 games, the trenches are going to be the biggest improvement.
Yeah. And closing out this week's podcast, Rymir, you're how old now? You 23? 24. You're 24 going on 40, right?
True.
What piece of advice to close out this week's pod? What piece of advice? Obviously, I mean, you know these guys really, really well. But what piece of advice do you have to the next generation of Owl Scoop reporters, Temple student media reporters? They look up to you. They respect you. Jason Nieves here is hanging out with us. You're going to be hearing more from him in the coming weeks. He's on the Temple News staff, works with us at Owl Scoop. He calls you Ankh. What's your advice to the next generation of great Temple reporters?
I'm glad you took your earphones out.
Yeah, Jay walks around with his earbuds in constantly.
I think number one, you got to work. That's where everything starts. As you've drilled into my head plenty of times, this is what you make of it. And if you're not willing to work and willing to spend hours and hours on end, whether it's writing a story or putting together a script, if you like TV and stuff like that, if you're not willing to put in that work, nothing is going to follow you. You're only going to get so many opportunities from people who actually can make stuff shake for you. If you're not working hard, you can get all the opportunities you want at TTN or WHIP, and it's not really going to matter if you're not putting in extra work to make sure the things that you do at TTN, do at WHIP are good and people notice it. Then you might as well, run of the mill. Like you just there. Like
Yeah.
you can't just be there. You got to stand out in some sort of way, and working hard is the best way to do that. 2, never stop learning and listening, because you don't know everything. No matter how old you get, you can always learn more. And the more you sit back and listen and, check your ego at the door, the better off you'll be. Because even the freshman who walks in, like if you're a junior, for example, even the freshmen who walk in can teach you something. You just gotta listen. 3, have fun. Like this is fun. This is a fun job to have. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes with how hard we work. And like it's okay to, enjoy the game that you're covering. Like you don't have to be sitting there cheering. You shouldn't be sitting there cheering. But like sit back and enjoy the game. Like if you love football, like watch football. Don't sit there and make it more than it is. Like it's not hard. It's not hard. The job isn't hard. You just have to do it. Have fun, work hard, learn, and listen.
Beautiful stuff. To close us out, Johnny, Declan, I mean, again, you're going to see Rymir for years to come. Close us out with your favorite thing about Rymir Vaughn to close out the scoop. Johnny, we'll go first.
Oh,
Hold
God.
it together. Don't cry.
You're really putting me on the spot here. Trying to think. Well, is this just like my favorite like personality trait of Rymir, or like my favorite memory of Rymir?
It could, whatever. Dealer's choice, whatever you want.
It's what you make of it, Johnny.
I'm trying to stall here, Declan. Stop.
Declan, what you go? Since
All right,
Johnny's
I'll
being a
go
bad
first.
friend and can't think of anything
Okay,
off the top of his head.
That's crazy. That's
I'll go
crazy.
first because, clearly some of us think about these things, others maybe not so much. It's okay. It's okay. I will say I met Mir almost 3 years ago now doing one-on-ones for WHIP Sports. And he walked into the studio and he clearly outlined the rest of his life, which I was dumbfounded by. And I knew immediately this was a person I needed around me and in my life. And I couldn't have imagined how much that was true. I've always, like, growing up, I have 4 younger siblings. I've always wanted an older brother. And I never really felt that kind of connection until I met Mir and became close with him. So it's going to be tough, obviously, doing college and, one last semester and whatnot without him. But I couldn't be happier to see him go. So this is going to be a wonderful next step and a well-earned next step. So I can't wait to see what you do, brother.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Beautiful.
Top that, Johnny.
Okay. You know what? I'm gonna say I think when it comes to Rymir, he is so focused. I think when it comes like the goals that he has and where he wants to be in his life. I mean throughout this entire process for him, I had no doubt that he was gonna get a job like this. He was going to achieve be where he is now, and I think that's like one of the things that I admire about him so much is how hard he works and what he knows where he wants to be. He knows where he wants to go. And I think that's what got him here to this point. And I think that's what's kind of helped me move myself along and for me to figure out. And I want to follow in his footsteps and do what he's doing and get to where he is. So, I mean, I think it's going to be like Declan said, I have 2 semesters left. I'm not as lucky as Declan when it comes to almost graduating, but these 2 semesters will definitely be very weird when I won't see him up in the press box at Lincoln Financial, or we won't be closing down the Leah Course Center with the lights off. And I think it'll be a lot different, but I'm really happy for him and I'm very excited for his future.
Very well said.
Thanks,
Rymir,
brother.
I love you. I would echo everything these guys say. If Chelsea and I have a son at some point, we would be very lucky to have a son like you. So we love you. We love you. But we're going to be seeing you a lot in the future.
Yeah.
It's not like he's moving to LA, moving out toward the Harrisburg area. So again, check out his work for Penn Live and the Harrisburg Patriot News. Again, a really awesome media outlet. So subscribe to his stuff. We'll be covering high school sports out there and a lot of the great athletes in that area. So thanks for sticking with us for another episode. Again, we're going to have a ton more preseason football in the coming weeks as these preseason camp battles start getting drilled down as that season opener at Oklahoma gets closer. So we will talk to you all soon. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.